Hey guys. I am still very sick. Ugh. I literally didn't come out of my room until after 1 o'clock. I have no appetite. I have chest and nasal congestion. But I gotta keep these videos flowing. I printed out last night, and I've been wanting to do this. There's this site called Jam Bios where you basically write your memoir, more or less. So I printed out the whole darn thing, basically, and I thought I would tell you about me. The first thing I'm going to read to you is my love of reading. I've been wanting to do this video for a while. And I figured since I'm sick, it's a good time to do it. I grew up being read to, reading or being read to since I can remember. The first books I read were Sweet Pickles books. They each had a moral. I was 4 when I started reading them independently. In 3rd grade, my teacher introduced me to Pippi Longstocking, James and the Giant Peach, and so much more. Soon began reading young adult / children's author Judy Blume's books. I still love her. I must have read Tales of a 4th Grade Nothing 5 times. I loved the MS Readathon. It was right up my alley. I always did great at it. As I got older, I began picking up my mom's true crime books and fell in love with author Anne Rule. God rest her soul. I wrote to her, and she sent me an autographed pic for my mom and I. The first book of hers I read was Small Sacrifices. I also read Stranger Beside Me and many of her True Crime Files books. She has since passed away. I used to love going to the used bookstore. I used to bring in books and get credit for more. My mom also introduced me to biography and autobiography books. I ate them up. My dad encouraged me to read TV and movie credits. He also said they were there for a reason, to thank all those who worked to make a show or movie. And it's true, you know. That's where I learned my phonetic skills, was reading credits, because names are so difficult. You know, everybody would say her phonics is so above, you know. And it was because of that. I do believe that. This is about this chapter, however you look at it, is about the Olympics. Because each chapter is about something different. I grew up watching Olympic sports. My favorites were and are skating and gymnastics. I grew up with heroes like Dorothy Hamill and Mary Lou Retton, to name a few. When I was little, I'd slide around the kitchen floor pretending I was skating. I would swing on my parents' cast iron closet rod, pretend I was a gymnast. In 2000, my dream came true when I got to see Stars on Ice live. I went with Nancy Kaminsky, and we were in the 2nd row. It was a great night. Scott Hamilton even did a backflip right in front of us. He and Mrs. K were cancer buddies and email pen pals. Sadly, she passed away from her cancer. It was so hard to watch skating right after she died. Now I have a cousin named Liz Cox, who used to skate to watch with over the computer since she's in Oregon. I could never stand on ice skates, but loved roller skating. It's true. Couldn't stand it all. Ow. Ugh. Ow. Oh, that hurts so bad. Wish I could find my thermometer, but I don't think I have a fever. This is about growing up. I grew up with my Uncle David's children, mostly his two sons, David, 5 months older, and Dennis, 11 months younger. They were my brothers growing up. And we fought like it at times, too. We had a lot of fun as well. My dad took us to Whalen Park, the beach, and so much more. We spent holidays together. David dropped my uncle's bowling ball on my big toe and broke my toe when we were about 3. I became a tomboy keeping up with them. We would play Knight Rider, and I'd be April, or Dukes of Hazzard, and I'd be Daisy. By the way, before I go on to another childhood story, we collected Garbage Pail Kids. Shout out to Jeremy Hales. What the hells? And we each had one was a name for us. My cousins, the closest thing to Angie or Angelina that we could find, my cousins gave me, which was Angela Galangelar. I would still love to find that one just to have it because that was me. I can't remember what each of my cousins were, but we came up with one for each of us. And it's funny, my cousin Dennis called himself Dennis the Menace who plays tennis, although he never played tennis. It just rhymed. Called himself Dennis the Menace. And it's funny because my father and his father were both Mr. Wilson. So, all through my childhood, we spent weekends every summer in Maine. We would visit my grandparents on the farm and stay with my Aunt Barb and her family. I had a lot of fun just running around the farm. I would even splash myself with the well pump when I was hot. My cousin Bobby Joe and I would swing on her porch swing. At night, we shared her Gram's hospital bed. It was an old hand crank one. We had fun with the old crank. On the farm, I even locked myself in an old truck. My grandpa gave me a tiny kid's guitar when I was little. I loved that thing. Here's more about, well, family. I am learning so much about my ancestors through genealogy. My mom got us started in about 1998. So in 2018, we decided to up our game and test our DNA. Surprise! We found out that the man Mom had been told was her dad was not, in fact, her dad. We gained a wonderful family. Mom has a brother and 3 sisters. My aunt and Uncle Norman have both come to visit us. It has been unbelievable. I've also found many Wilson and Hemingway relatives. I have connected with my cousins, Cheryl and Linda Jean. It's so, and I've also connected with my cousin Elton, their brother. Him I kind of knew anyway because his mom lived with him. And I would talk to his mom. I just, the reason, and you know, it's funny, people will assume that you know your first cousins, that you know their married names, and you know their kids, and you know, because they're your first cousins, they're your parents' siblings' kids. But that isn't always the case. And in my case, Well, for one thing, they grew up on the West Coast. But for another thing, Linda Jean, for example, was the same age as my mother. He's the same age as my mother, which is insane. Cheryl and Elton are significantly older than me as well, but not old enough to be my mother. Melinda Jean was born way before them, to a different marriage of my middle aunt. And my cousins that belong to my oldest aunt, also old enough, well, her oldest is a year older than my mother. So he would call her auntie just to tease her. And no, my mother wasn't a million years younger than my father, only 10. But my father was a lot younger than his sisters. The closest of his 3 sisters, the youngest, who is still alive, who I showed you her picture over there, would be about 7 years older than him. So, the rest of this, even before DNA, we found my grandma Wilson's first cousins, Mitty and Frank. They have both since passed, but what a wealth of information and love they were. We found them and it was immediate. The connection that was made. We visited each other. Well, they came here mostly, and we went down to Frank's with Mitty. But Mitty came here a few times, and it was just awesome. I grew up in what we called the neighborhood, in quotes. It consisted of 4 buildings sharing a driveway on the main street of our little town. From our neighborhood, it was a short trek through a well-worn wooded path to the dead-end street our school was on. We walked that path each and every day. Our neighborhood was a family. We lived on the first floor of the last building in. It was a very nice apartment. We had 3 bedrooms, a mid-sized bathroom, and I spent many happy hours in that tub singing Bible songs with my mom. There was a mantle in the parlor and the master bedroom. The parlor light was a giant fluorescent light. It had issues. You had to switch again and again to get it to come on. You did. It was, you had to, because there was a wiring issue with it. Which actually happens with fluorescent lights, because they were the long tubes, and I think there were 2 tubes, and those tubes get loose. The connection gets loose on those tubes, and you have to force it. All the kids played together, and the parents were friends. We made lifelong friends in our neighborhood, even after some of us had to leave. I got godparents from that neighborhood. I got people who were like aunts and uncles, cousins, and so much more to me. For a while, my uncle and cousins lived there too. So many of the folks who lived there as I grew, are gone from this world now. Cindy, Auntie Sharon as I called her, and more, including my own father and now my mom, have passed on. I miss that place. We had our bad times, but the good outweighed them. Us kids had adventures in the woods. We even made a fort out of a little storage area under the stairs to the upstairs apartment. Mike, our landlord, didn't care. He let us kids do almost anything we wanted. He let Mom paint the 1970s paneling. Mom used to collect the rents for him since he lived far away. For a while, everyone played musical apartments. It was a running joke that Mike would come and not know where everyone lived because they'd all changed apartments. I would like to find my babysitter and upstairs neighbor, Mitzi. I found my best friend, Chrissy. We shared pics, but never got close again. I am still friends with many of the kids I grew up with there. I was the oldest of the bunch. I learned so much there. I learned to walk downtown all by myself. I would go to the video store, Todd's Video, and rent movies while Dad napped. It's true. As I told you, Dad worked hard, was already in his 40s, and he would nap. I think it said insufficient space on the SD card. I'm going to have to put up my videos. This one's about my Grandpa Wilson. And this one's about my Uncle Richard. So what I'm going to do is finish this after I put the other ones up and delete them from the card. Okay, I'm back. This next story is about my grandfather Wilson. Although I never met my Grandpa Wilson, I know so much about him. He was a World War II vet, having been in his 40s when he enlisted. He became a member of our country's last cavalry, learned marksmanship, and wrestled in the army. My mom says he was a trick shot pool player and a ballroom dancer. What an amazing man. I know he liked to drink and could be mean when he did. I also know he and my dad did not get along well. My mom cared for him at the end of his life. He had dementia and heart disease. He was also crippled by arthritis. He was a gentleman and would yell at my dad if he did not take off his boots before entering the house if my mom had just washed the floor. In his confusion, he once turned on all the stove burners, filling the house with gas. He once also filled the house with oil. I think he turned on the fireplace or something. He turned something on and filled the house with oil, and it was a mess. He tried to help Mom out by doing dishes in cold water. I have been told by both of my parents that he would have loved me. He sometimes confused my mom with my dad's first wife. He also would call my grandmother at the nursing home and tell her my mom was poisoning him. And my grandmother would have to explain, no, she's putting your heart medication in your food. When Gran would come over on the weekends, she would sit on my grandfather's hat because my grandfather wouldn't go anywhere without his hat, and it would keep him from leaving the house. Yeah, so my grandfather's helpfulness with his dementia didn't help. This last story is my Uncle Richard. When I was growing up, my Uncle Richard was everything to me. He bought my big wheels as my baptism gift. He did it by taking me outside and giving me money several times that day. My mom says everyone wanted to go outside with him. I remember him trying to teach me to play pool. This was years later. We went to a little bar downtown, and he was trying to teach me to play pool. The only problem was I'm so short. This pool table came up to like my shoulders, and it was very difficult. My uncle was my protector. He was always there for me. When I started playing softball, he got me a mitt. He gave me a set of ET trading cards. If I still had them, they'd be worth big bucks. Darn. He was at the hospital for my surgery to put in my port. He was on the phone constantly during my treatments. When he became ill, I was determined to be there for him. It was so hard to visit him so weak and thin. He had been a big, solid, strong man who had just withered away. He died on February 11th, 2011. He was 61. He was a couple months shy of 62. His funeral was a disaster. His ex-wife made it very difficult for Dad and I. That's what when I said that piece of paper in my trinket box was personal, it had to do with my uncle. The time that he was in the hospital and stuff. Excuse me. A lot of underhanded things went down that I'm not going to go into because it's family stuff, but suffice it to say, my uncle's wishes were not carried out. That's all I'm going to say. And it's unfortunate. And also, unfortunately, part of his cremains are buried with his former in-laws. In a Catholic cemetery. So, he was not Catholic. He should have been buried with his parents and his brother. That's where his cremains should be. They should be his parents, his grandparents, his great-grandparents, his great-great-grandparents. I kid you not. All his great-aunts and uncles and his big brother. Well, he died before Dad, but yeah, he should be there. Not in a Catholic cemetery with his ex-wife's parents. Just saying. That wasn't even the beginning of the wishes that weren't fulfilled. So, I won't go there, but you get the idea, and it was not a fun day. It wouldn't have been a fun day even if things hadn't gone so horribly wrong. She virtually ignored me. His granddaughter was wonderful. Well, his stepdaughter's daughter, but he always called her his granddaughter. I will say that for him. He didn't get along with his stepdaughter, but her daughter was his world. So. Excuse me. I just know that I know his heart, I know what he wanted, and that makes me feel good. Yeah, that piece of paper was about getting his records, which we were told we could not have, even though my father was next of kin. Anyway, but there was a whole lot more to it than that. Not that there was any, I want to preface, I want to say this in closing. There was never thoughts of foul play or anything like that in that case. My uncle died from a strangulated hernia that they refused to operate on because I asked him if he would stop drinking and he said no. So no, nothing, no lawsuits, no foul play, no nothing. just my father's little brother, and we wanted to know. Well, it's funny when I say little brother, my uncle was a mountain. My father was a little man. As you can see from the picture, my father was a small man. Small average. He was about 5'7", 130 pounds. My father was a small man. And his brothers were both over 6 foot, 200 and something pounds of just mountain, both of them. Uncle Richard even bigger than Uncle David. And they get that from their Wilson grandfather, who is said by family to have been 6'3". So their father was about the height of my father, built very similarly to my father, from what I gather. From the looks of pictures, I would say his father was built more like his mother than his dad, because his dad was very tall. So, but I guess you can be anywhere in between your parents. So, but they also had a very tall grandmother on the Hemingway side. My grandmother's mother was 6'2". I kid you not. Okay, we got less than 30% power left. This woman was a giant of a lady, especially for her time. I don't know if all of her sisters were that tall, but she was a freaking giant of a lady. I wonder if great-great-grandpa Mitty was tall. Because somebody had to be, for her to be the giant she was. And 6'2". You have to remember, this woman died in 1960 at the age of 80. This woman was born in 1880. And to end up 6'2" as a female in that time frame is Amazonian in proportions. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I am going to rest because I'm determined to be better Tuesday. Because I will walk down there, even if I have to wear a mask. I want to be there. Even if I can't stay long because I don't have the energy. That's okay too. I just want to be there. And I have so many errands to run. I just can't afford to be sick. I did write a note to my doctor. I will let you know what happens with that. Probably get that first thing in the morning, usually do. And we'll unbox Carmen tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. God bless you. Please subscribe. Please like, comment, or put an emoji. And don't forget the bell for notifications. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. God bless you.